the way that it's been in my personal life is Yahweh would show me one thing. And when I'd walk toward it and say, wow, this is amazing, then he'd show me another. And then he would show me another. The spiritual principle is, to him that has, more will be given.
Brothers and sisters, as you see, we've got a special guest with us today. This is a brother that I just met recently online, and I'm so thankful that I met him. I guess he's one of my favorite new people right now.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Pastor Steve Martin. So the way that I came across you, brother, is I was sitting in my bed one night and scrolling through Facebook, seeing what some of the brothers and sisters had posted, answering some questions, and somebody had posted, I guess it was a little vertical video, which was a live stream where you were answering some people that had talked about you on their broadcast, Rob Van Hoff and Caleb Higg, which I had a run-in with them back in 2014. I mean, we tried to keep it cordial, but I kept all of the back and forth on my computer, audio
Yes.
and written. So, if anybody ever asked me about it, I would have it. But I don't want to go into all of that, but they treated me similar to how they treated you.
Unnecessary. Yeah.
It was, brother. It was unnecessary, and especially to an older man. 1 Timothy 5:1 says, rebuke not an older man, but entreat him as a father. So
Yes.
you're probably like me. I don't have a problem with somebody disagreeing with me, but do it in a cordial manner.
Exactly.
Yeah. I watched about, I don't know, 15 or 30 minutes, and I saw it was like a 90-minute session. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to watch all 90 minutes. Well, after 30 minutes, I was hooked. I was impressed by two things: how you handled the sarcasm and the naysaying. I was very impressed, which I expect that out of an elder, but you just don't see it these days anymore like you used to. But I was also impressed, Brother Steve, by your ability to teach. I feel like when a man is an elder, 1 Timothy 3 says that one of the qualifications, the criteria, is he must be apt to teach or able to teach. So Rob and Caleb were kind of throwing off on you, and I was thinking, I'm 180 degrees opposite. I see that this man is apt to teach, and he's got me. I'm almost sitting on the seat of my bed waiting on what he's going to say next. And I'm not even. I'll say it like this: I'm not persuaded one way or the other on the inspiration of
You
First
mentioned
Enoch.
that, right?
Yeah, but I don't. I mean, I don't have a problem with you teaching on it. And even if you and I don't see eye to eye as it ends up on that particular topic, I can still tell that you're a brother in the faith. You have the testimony of the Messiah, and you keep the commandments, Revelation, right?
Right. Exactly. There you go.
So that's how I ran across Pastor Steve. And I told myself, I said, I got to have him on the channel because I've got to share his wisdom and his ministry with the people that view my channel. I think it'll be edifying for them. So that's why I brought you on, Pastor Steve. Yeah.
Well, I'm honored and thank you very much. I have been thrilled to meet you and to meet Sean, to make your acquaintance. I haven't met you personally yet. It has been encouraging to me to run across you guys. And
brother.
All things work together for the good to them who love Yahweh. And so when I look back on that video that you're talking about with Caleb and Rob, the good that's come out of it, I rejoice. I'd have never played that video to defend myself. It's not worth it. Sure. But I saw some teaching opportunities in it. It's the only reason I did it. And I'm glad I did because I got to meet you as a result of it.
Yeah,
Thank
brother. You. Yeah, you're very welcome. I feel blessed. Tell us a little bit about your background. Let's go way back. How were you raised? What faith? What religion? Your family life, church life. How did you grow up?
My parents were awesome. I actually just lost my dad. He died last February.
Oh man.
My mom died at very young, 63 years old. So she died a little over 20 years ago, but they were awesome parents. They were not churchgoers. Mom made sure that we were at the local Baptist church vacation Bible school every summer. And that got me and my brothers involved in church. New Lebanon Baptist Church up in St. Clair County, down in St. Clair County here in Oklahoma.
Okay.
So, and then by going to vacation Bible school, you know, there were people there that took an interest in us and would encourage us to come. There was a elderly couple. They were, God, I say elderly. They don't seem so elderly now, but as a child, they did. You know, they were in their 70s. Mr. and Miss Leachman, they drove an old Studebaker. And they had come by and pick me up and carry me to church on Sundays.
Wow.
And then eventually that little country church got a little wore out church bus, and somebody would run it. And I'd go to church on Sundays with them or on the church bus. And 11, 12, 13 years old, my brothers and I, and there's a couple of boys that lived up the street from us who would come down, and we'd all wait out in the yard together, catch that church bus. And I'd preach I had three brothers, and to those two guys. And when I say I'd preach to them while I was waiting on the church bus, what I mean is I'd open my Bible and I'd read it real loud because I thought that's what preaching was. So I remember doing that as a small child.
Wow.
I first sensed that I was to be in the ministry at that early age. And even at 15 years old, it was different time back then, you know. So
yeah,
my parents would let me drive myself to church. Even though I didn't have a driver's license, but you know, it wasn't but about 4 or 5 miles up the road, and it's a country road. So, but on Sunday nights particular, I would leave the church after the service, and I'd go find a place where I could just kind of park and wait. And I'd wait till everybody left. Then I'd go back and I'd raise the windows in that church, and I'd climb in. And I'd get up there behind the pulpit and just preach the empty pews. It was just, you know, something burning inside of me to do that. You know, I had my issues as a teenager like anybody else, but
sure,
you know, it was burning in me. I'm thankful. We had a young pastor come in when I was about 17 years old. He was Pastor Ted Traylor. He's still high up in the Southern Baptist organization, but he was a student at Sanford University, and he came in and you know, every pastor we ever had before looked ancient to me. They were always at least 45, and it just seemed very ancient to me. But here was a guy I could relate to. He really wasn't but about 3 years older than me.
Wow.
So I could relate to him. And I had bought my senior year. I went and sports were finally over. I could work. So I saved up some money, and I went and bought me a 1971 Chevelle Malibu. And gosh, I love that car.
Goodness.
To this day,
have
do what now?
Do you still have it?
No, I wish I did, because to this day, it's the only car I've ever owned that I loved. I loved that car. But when, during the Jimmy Carter years, when gas went up to 72 cents a gallon, I didn't think I could afford it anymore. So I sold it, bought a Volkswagen. Bad mistake.
Oh my goodness.
But I bought that car, and I was going down the road there in front of our house. Wasn't very far from my house, and I met Pastor Ted Traylor, and he flagged me down. So I stopped and backed up, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, I'm going to Birmingham. I'm going to buy me some mag wheels to go on my Chevelle. He said, "Let me pull over and park. I'll go with you." And that shocked me, absolutely shocked me. And so he got in the car with me. It gave us a lot of time to connect, to talk. Later, I'd find out he called that hip pocket evangelism, where, you know, he just get in your hip pocket and hang out with you and have an influence on you. But he did have an influence on me.
Yeah.
May 23rd, 1976, on a Sunday night, I went up. you know how you always have altar calls.
Oh yeah, we had
So
them
I
growing
went
up.
up and took his hand, trembling, terrified, and said to him, I think I've been called to preach, but I don't have a clue. I don't know what that means, but I feel like I have.
Yeah.
And he opened the Bible up and he read that passage where it says, if a man desires the office of a
Yeah.
bishop,
Mm-hmm.
and he began to talk to me about desire. And that that helped me a whole lot, and to begin to, I don't know, process what I was going through, because that was May 23rd, May 28th, 1976. I graduate high school, so this was 5 days before I graduated.
Mm-hmm.
um, that last week of high school, I told one of my friends what had happened on Sunday night. I talked to him Monday at school. Well, a couple of days later, there was a Presbyterian preacher who always drove our football team back and forth to games. He was always the bus driver. But he saw me in the hall and he said, "Hey, I hear you're called to preach." I said, "Yes, sir, I guess so." He said, "Good, you're preaching at my church Sunday night." So, a week after, here I am standing in a Presbyterian church. They had a great big old wooden podium. When I would grab it, I was so nervous that thing would rattle on the floor. Blah, 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 blah. So I had to turn it loose. But that's how I got started preaching.
How about that?
Uh, at 18 and 19 years old, I did a lot of supply work, filling in for preachers. They found out that they could call me on a Sunday morning and say, "Hey, I don't feel good. Can you come preach?" And I would.
Wow.
A lot of folks need 2 months notice before they'd
Sure.
go preach, or 2 weeks at least, but I'd go. And so I got to do a lot of supply work, even ended up being an interim pastor at a little old place called Akmar Baptist Church for a couple of years.
Wow. And that was Southern Baptist, Akmar Baptist.
All of it. Yeah. All of them Southern Baptist, Missionary Baptist.
Yeah. Yeah. So how
Uh,
big was Akmar? Was it like 100
oh,
people?
tiny.
Real
Oh
tiny.
gosh, no, very, less than 10.
Wow.
They
So
were in
like one of
trouble.
them,
Yeah.
yeah, like one of the more primitive Baptist
Yes, they
congregations,
were
real
bad. Now,
small.
New Lebanon, when Pastor Trailer was there, we got up to 100, 120 people, maybe a little more than that. The church was never that way before him, and I don't know that it's ever been that way after him. But he was able to draw a lot of people in there, and had influence on a lot of young people and young adults.
Wow.
I graduated high school. I enrolled at Samford University. I don't know if you're familiar with it there in
Yes, sir.
Birmingham. It's a Southern Baptist school, was, Southern
Mhm.
Baptist school.
Sure.
So I went there. That's where Ted went. So I thought that's where I needed to go. And
You were in your 20s when you went there?
no, I went there when I was 18 years old, right out of
Wow.
high school,
Wow.
for my
Wow.
first semester.
Okay.
Uh, I went and told my dad I'm enrolling in Sanford. I'm going to go to school. And he said, "Son, I don't know how you're going to do that. I don't have the money to send you to school." I said, "I didn't come in here and ask you for money. I just wanted you to know I'm enrolling in school."
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I didn't know how I was going to do it. But I told him, I said, if, and the only way I knew to call him back then was God. I didn't know the
Sure.
name Yahweh, but I said, if God's called me, then he'll make a way.
Yeah.
And he did. It was amazing to watch how he worked things out.
Mm. How many years
But
did you go to Sanford?
I crammed 4 years into 9. it it took me 9 years to finish it.
So you actually visited the college and took the classes for 9 years.
I did. I was on campus for what happened. I got married, and then
Mhm.
working jobs. I was when I started pastoring when I was 20 years old.
Okay.
My first pastorate was Central Baptist Church in Argo, Alabama.
Mm.
Um, but most of the time when I pastored, I was bivocational, as I am now.
Sure.
And then so I was trying to go to school, pastor church, sometimes work a job, and then I would have a baby. Um, my first one was born in 1979, so we'd have a baby, and I'd drop out for a semester, or sometimes I'd drop out for a year. Then I'd go back, and then I'd drop out for a semester. And I have 4 children now, so you know, the life would just sometimes get in the way of school, but I was determined to get through it. So I finally graduated 9 years after I started.
Wow. Wow.
Which leads me to, I think you'll understand this. Because I was pastoring and going to school, all I ever had time to read was what they told me to read.
Yeah.
And all I had time to do in the Bible was find the sermon.
Yeah.
I didn't have time to read it. I had to find a sermon. And so after I graduated, I was pastoring my Second Baptist church by then, a place called Glenwood Baptist up in Morris, Alabama. And had a great time there. We saw the church grow. We built a brand new facility.
Wow.
While I was there, we were, I was going to school and trying to finish up, so I was really loading myself down. So sometimes I was surviving on 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night, but we had a great time. But I said all that to say this: I finally graduated. I was full time for the first time ever as a pastor, and that gave me time that I'd never had before. And so we just built that new place, built me a new office. It was very nice. So I didn't know what else to do. So I just went in there and started reading my Bible. And I started it just like you would any other book. I started in the front and I was reading to the back. Wow. And it'll change your life. Yes, if you ever read it for yourself, it'll change your life.
Yes.
I was reading, as I said, and it takes a while, but that's what I do every day. I just go read my Bible. And I got to Psalm 100. Sitting in my office, won't ever forget it, sitting there, and I read Psalm 100, got it read, because that one from Vacation Bible School, that's very familiar. So I read it, and then I went to the next one. And there's very few times I'll say that I heard the voice of the Ruach or of Yahweh. But as I went on to the next chapter in Psalm, I heard down on the inside of me, y'all sing about me, but y'all don't ever sing to me. And I thought, So I went back and I read Psalm 100 again. Make a joyful noise unto Yahweh. And so I read that again, and it just kept ringing on the inside of me. Y'all sing about me, but you don't ever sing to me. I jumped up out of my office and literally ran down the hall and into the sanctuary, grabbed one of my Baptist hymnals, came back to my office, sat down and opened that thing up and just went to flipping through it. And I thought, oh my word, we sing about him, but we don't ever sing to him.
Wow.
And so that was an amazing week as I just began to search and research and look at different things about praising him.
Yeah.
And so the next Sabbath, how you I guess I don't really know a lot about your background, but in that background, the structure's pretty strict. You sing a song, you have announcements.
Oh yeah.
You sing another song and you take up an offering, then you sing a couple of songs, maybe the choir does a special, and then you get to preach for 20 minutes. That's the structure. So I knew not to mess with the structure, but once they were done with everything they do in the structure, and it was time for me to preach, I had printed out some little choruses, and I'd put them inside the bulletin, a couple of choruses. And so I asked everybody to stand up, and I said, now listen, we have just finished singing about him. I want us to take just a few minutes and sing these choruses to him. And so we did. That afternoon, the deacons had a meeting.
Oh my goodness.
And so every Sunday morning I would do that very thing. And within, I would say, 3 Sundays of doing that, I got called into a deacon's meeting.
Oh.
And I was told I needed to stop because it was too charismatic. We don't want people to accuse us of being charismatic.
Oh.
And they asked me to stop, and I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And they said, why? why won't you stop? I said, guys, I don't work for you. You can't hire me. I'm not for hire. Now, you can fire me.
Yeah.
But you can't hire me.
That's right.
And they agreed with me that they could fire me. And
so they fired you.
They eventually did. I think it was the next week. We had another deacons meeting, and
it was over that small thing, over the singing.
That small thing, singing.
Oh my goodness!
And
unbelievable.
So in the next deacon meeting, I thought maybe they just don't understand.
Yeah.
And so I was sitting in a circle, or they were in a circle. I was sitting there, and I had my Bible, and I would say, "Let me show you what I found." I was really excited. I was, in my naivety, I just thought they don't understand, and so I would say, "Guys, look, there's no sense in being upset. Let me show you what I found in the scriptures," and I would start reading to them various things.
Wow!
The chairman of the deacons slammed his hands on that desk, wham, and he said, "Will you put that Bible up? We have no qualms with you about what's in the Bible. We know that what you're saying is in the Bible, but you have to understand, we don't want to have anything to do with that here."
Oh my goodness.
A man, that's when I realized it's a spiritual war, because a man in his right mind would never say that. There had to be an influence to cause a man to say something like that. But
no, it's so, brother, I had a situation one time where there was one time I tried to put my oldest child, this has been a long time ago, 20 years ago,
yes,
in a school, and it was a small Christian school. And word got back around to me that there was some disruption. And I told her, she was 5 years old. So I just told her just to, you know what mom and dad teach you at home. And she wore a head covering when she prayed. And she used the name Yahweh and Yeshua in her Bible verses. And
at 5 years old.
At 5 years old. Oh yeah. I've raised my children like this since they were born. Praise Yahweh. That's by his mercy that I got to do it. But word got back around, and I had to have a meeting with the superintendent and the principal. And the superintendent, who was a learned man, graduated from seminary, he told me, he said, "I know that God's name is Yahweh, and I know that Jesus' original name is Yeshua. I understand that." He said, "But those names are not to be said at this school." And when he told me that, I was respectful, but I told him, I said, "Sir, that's all I needed to know." I said, "She won't be coming back." But it's amazing. It's amazing that they can say that and then disregard that. And it sounds like that's exactly what this Baptist deacon or pastor was telling you. They don't want the scriptures. They're so in tune with their tradition. They don't want what the scriptures teach.
You cannot go on this journey. I call it out of Babylon and into Torah. You can't go on this journey without encountering people in authority, whether they be principals or pastors or whatever, professors. You can't go on this journey without them meeting people who will tell you, "We know that what you're saying is true. We know that's in the Bible, but we don't do that here." And that's sad.
Yeah,
it really is. I had eventually, I got dismissed from a third Baptist church. I didn't learn my lesson, so I went to a third one. But, I would have pastors who would tell me, "We know that what you're saying is true.
Wow.
We see it too. But if we preached it, Steve, we'd get fired." And that's sad. That's a hireling. That's what the Bible calls a hireling.
Correct.
There's certain things in the Bible they refuse to preach because they know they'll lose their job.
Yep. That's right. So was this what made you leave the Baptist church? Was it just about the singing? And when you left the Baptist church, what did you get involved in after that?
It wasn't about the singing, and that particular church was. It was about charismatic stuff.
Okay.
But that made me wonder, what else am I missing? And so I got to studying a lot of things. I began to see, things about the gifts of the Spirit and healing and things of that nature. But one more real quick story is that after that church fired me, there was a church not far from where I grew up, 15, 20 miles from where I grew up. I'd gone there and preached a couple of revivals before and had a great time. And so when they heard that I'd been fired, one of the deacons contacted me and wanted to know if I'd consider being their pastor. Their pastor hadn't left yet. He was going to do a semi-retirement kind of thing and go somewhere else. And so he had given them, plenty of notice. And so they were kind of looking. And I said, I knew the pastor, Brother Roy, and I said, Brother Roy's still there? And he said, yeah. And I said, look, guys, I really don't think y'all want me to be your pastor. And I appreciate it. I'm honored you'd call, but no, thank you.
Yeah.
And so 2 weeks later, that deacon called me back and he said, we really, really think you should come be our pastor. And I said, well, I tell you what, y'all are not the authority there. That pastor's the authority. Y'all don't recognize it, but he is.
True.
And I said, y'all go talk to him and you tell him this, that I'm going to preach the whole Bible. I'm going to preach healing. I'm going to preach the gifts of the Spirit. I'm going to preach praise and worship. Y'all go tell him that. And don't call me back until you've talked to him. I'll meet with you if he okays it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they called me back a few days later and said, we talked to Brother Roy and he said, you're just what this church needs. And I said, all right, set me up a meeting with the deacons. So I went and sat down with the deacons and we sat around the table and they all, shared their excitement that I might consider coming. They wanted me to come, blah, blah, blah. And so I took my Bible and I held it up and I said, men, I need y'all to understand something. For the first time in my life, I got a whole Bible. And no man's going to take it away from me. If I come here, I'm going to preach it. Everything in it, I'm going to preach it. And so they, with tears in their eyes, they said, oh, that's just what we need. That's just what we need. We need you to come. I said, all right, fine. I'll come. So 2 or 3 weeks later, I did go. I went on Sunday morning. We had a great time. I preached, had a great time. Sunday afternoon, Matthew, I've never had it happen before in my life, but Sunday afternoon, I lost my voice. I mean, completely lost it.
Wow.
And I say completely lost it. I could just barely above a whisper, I could talk. I'm new in this stuff. I'm so new. I've been a Baptist all my life. I say from my radiator to my tail lights, I was a Baptist. That's all I've ever known. And but Sunday afternoon, I just began to sense, okay, this is where it's at. And I just sit there in that little office at that church on Sunday afternoon, researching every scripture I could find on healing. And so when Sunday night got there, we had more people there Sunday night than we had Sunday morning, the new preachers here. So, I told the music guy and the sound guy, I said, I'm going to put the microphone close. Normally, I don't need a microphone. I'm going to put the microphone close. I want you to turn that thing up and so people can hear me. So Sunday night, I stood up and I just read. That's all I did. Didn't preach. I just read every scripture I could on healing. And I started in the Tanakh.
Yes.
It's full of healing scriptures.
Amen.
And,
Amen.
I remember I used to tell my Baptist friends, because they didn't believe in that stuff, I'd say, look, y'all keep telling me we got a new and a better covenant. Well, the old covenant had healing in it. If you're going to take that away and tell me I got a better covenant, I don't want the better covenant. I want the one that's got the healing in it.
Good point.
So anyway, I read every scripture I could on healing.
Yes.
And when I got through, I closed my Bible and I said, look, folks, I don't know what to do. I'm just honest with you. I don't know what to do. I said, but is there anybody in here who's sick? And 2 people raised their hand. I said, well, why don't you come up here and let's pray?
Wow.
Well, when I said that, over 20 people walked up. 2 raised their hand, 20 people walked up.
Wow.
And in a Baptist church, we're used to people being in a single file line, come one at a time and you talk to the pastor and then you move on.
Sure.
In Pentecostal churches, they line up across the front.
Yes. Yes.
And these people came up and just lined up across the front.
Yep.
And I was Baptist. That freaked me out. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there looking at them because I was a Baptist. And
Yeah.
so I'm looking, trying to figure out what to do. And finally, I came down off the platform and I just went to the first one and I said, well, what's wrong with you? Well, I got a headache, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, whew, good. All right. So we pray for that. Next one, some of the little something's hurting. And, so I just go down through there praying for them. But about halfway down through there, I get to a deacon's wife and I asked her what's wrong. And she was having some kind of kidney issue. I'd never done this before in my life either, but I called Marie, my wife. I looked around behind me and I saw, or that person I saw, Marie, I said, come up here. Marie came up there and I said, I want you to put your hands on her kidney. And I put my hand on her. I'm Baptist. I don't do that kind of thing, but that's what I felt led to do. So we prayed for her. And then she walked off. Well, the very next person was a young girl and she said, I'm deaf in one ear. Uh-oh. So I said, well, okay, we're going to pray for you. And so I'm standing there trying to figure out how to pray for her.
Yeah.
And Marie whispered to me, she said, I think it's her eustachian tube. Because the mother had come up with her and she said she had pain in her ear and it went down her neck. And Marie said, I think it's her eustachian tube. So I turned around and whispered to Marie. I said, well, what's a eustachian tube? She said, I don't have any idea. I said, then why do you think it's her eustachian tube? She said, that's the word I see. I said, see? She said, yes. And there was tissue up on the communion table. So she pulled a tissue out and she took my ink pen and she wrote this word down and handed it to me. And she said, I see. I see that word.
Wow.
So I prayed for that girl. I said, hey, God just told us what's wrong with your ear. It's your eustachian tube. So we're going to pray. Now, when I said that, I didn't know if her eustachian tube was in her left leg or elbow. I didn't have a clue what one was, but we prayed. And when we did, she said it popped and she could hear. And so we rejoiced. She went on. And then I went down through there and we prayed for everybody else. Yeah. So when we went home, my books from school were packed in my closet. I dug through there till I found my biology book. I opened it up and found the eustachian tube in the ear, goes down the neck. And miracle of miracles, Marie, who's not the best of spellers, had spelled it exactly the way it was supposed to be spelled. And so we get into bed and we're rejoicing because we had never seen or experienced anything like this. Nobody told us or how to do it. It was just exciting. And we're laying in the bed rejoicing when the phone rang.
Oh, no.
And so I picked up the phone and it's that deacon's wife that had the kidney problem.
Wow.
And so I picked up the phone and I said, hello. And she said, Steve, this is, and she told me her name. And I'm thinking, wow, okay, another testimony. And I said, she said, we prayed for me to be healed tonight. I said, yes, I do. She said, well, if it's okay with you, I don't want God to heal me. I said, excuse me? She said, if it's okay with you, I don't want God to heal me. I said, well, I'm new at this, don't know a whole lot, but I'm pretty sure if you don't want him to heal you, he's not going to heal you. And she said, okay, good. Thank you. And hung up.
Wow.
And Marie said, what was that all about? And I said, oh, it has started. The deacons had a meeting that night, and that woman would rather fit in than be healed.
Wow.
And they met Wednesday night, they met Sunday morning, they met Sunday night, they met the next Wednesday night. Finally, they called me and asked me if they could come to my house. I got my voice back after that Sunday night. And so I had never seen it before. It was all new to me, but starting Wednesday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night, I preached Mark chapter 7, where you make void the word of Yahweh through your traditions.
Wow.
Protect the word of Yahweh that you can hold to your traditions. And that's all I preached. The rest of the time I was there, that's all I preached was Mark chapter 7. But finally, the chairman of the deacons, who was also principal at the local high school where I had gone,
Uh-huh.
and where my children eventually graduated from. But the chairman of the deacons called and asked if they could come over, and I said yes. And so they came over and sat down in my living room, and they fidgeted. They were nervous. They didn't want to broach the subject. But the chairman of deacons had sat on the sofa beside me, so I reached over and I slapped him on the leg, and I said, "What's up, Ed?" And he said, "Well, Steve, we've been having meetings." I said, "Yeah, I've noticed that." He said, "We don't really know what to do." He said, "Some of the things you're preaching and teaching are upsetting people.
Hmm.
But yet every time somebody gets upset about it in a deacon's meeting,
Mm-hmm.
somebody else would remind them, well, he's doing exactly what he told us he was going to do. He told us he was going to do that before he came.
Yep.
So you can't be mad at him. He's only doing what he said he'd do. But man, it's just causing all kind of trouble in our church," he said. And I slapped him on the leg. I said, "Would it help you if I don't come back?" He said, "Oh, Steve, would you please? Would you?" I said, "Man, if you don't want me there,
Oh my goodness.
I won't
Wow.
come back." And so that's how we parted that place. I wasn't there, but 2.5 months, maybe 3 months.
Wow. Wow. So did you go from the Baptist church to like a charismatic Pentecostal style church? Was that your next step in your journey?
The next step in my journey was that we had some friends who were some a man that I'd known since elementary school. He and his wife were attending a Pentecostal type church.
Mm-hmm.
And after I'd gotten dismissed from that Third Baptist church, again, I was just learning to hear the voice of Yahweh, just learning to recognize the promptings of the Holy Spirit. But I had started listening to a man on the radio back in, there was a lot of teaching and preaching on the radio back in the 80s.
Sure.
And I'd started listening to a man named Pastor Scott Webb. He had a place over in Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to say it any other way other than I heard on the inside, "Go submit yourself to that man."
Wow.
And so I did. I went over there. I say I did. I did not do what I was told to do. I went over there on a Sunday morning,
Mm-hmm.
and he was meeting in a storefront. And, there were 70 or 80 people there, and they had guitars and drums and everything. And
Right.
it was not what I was used to.
Yeah.
And I kind of looked down on the storefront thing because we had this big, beautiful building when I was pastoring over in Morris. And I sat there, and he came across as arrogant to me.
Hmm.
And the truth of the matter is, I'd never submitted myself to anybody in my life except my parents.
Yeah.
And I graduated from Sanford University. That pride's a horrible thing.
Wow.
And I thought, no, I'm not submitting this to this guy. Like to hear him teach on the radio, but I'm not submitting to this guy. Well, back to my friend from school, they invited us to come to, they had a storefront Pentecostal charismatic kind of fellowship over in Branchville, Alabama. And they invited us to come eat lunch with them and then go to church with them that night. And so we agreed. We had lunch with them. And then that night we went to church with them, and there was probably 70 or 80 people there in that little old storefront. And after the service, with my hand up, this is what happened. After the service, the pastor said, "It's good to have Steve and Marie here with us tonight. Thank y'all so much for coming." And he turned to the people and he said, "Steve's going to be y'all's new pastor." And he turned around and walked out the back door and never came back.
Oh my goodness.
And me and the people are standing looking at each other like, what just happened? It wasn't something I wanted, and it certainly wasn't something they wanted.
Wow.
Matthew, because I was dealing with some anger issues,
Mm.
hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Anger and pain don't mix real well together.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I had been a Baptist all my life. It's all I'd ever seen myself being was a Baptist. I never walked away from the Baptist. The Baptist gave me the left foot of fellowship,
Yeah.
and it hurt. I I wasn't used to being rejected, and I had some anger issues, and that's the reason I was to go submit to another man and get healed
Mm.
instead of trying to take on another pastorate.
Mm.
But that man walked out of that building and said, "This is your new pastor." Well, it didn't take me but a few weeks to grow that church from 70 down to about 10. Because the anger was there.
Yeah.
I was bitter. I was angry.
Yeah.
We held on to those 10 or 12 for a year and a half or so until it finally just died. And then, I'd been a preacher all my life since I was 18 years old. I determined that I was going to prove to everybody I knew that I was anything but a preacher. I rebelled. I walked away from it.
How old were
I
you at this time?
28 years old.
Wow. 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 Wow.
29 maybe. Um,
Did you stay in church when
No.
No, you didn't. No.
I got out. I poured myself into a career because, see, I had no
Wow.
skills. All I'd ever done really was pastor and work part-time jobs here and there. And so,
Wow.
I finally went to work for a company called 84 Lumber.
Yeah.
Worked myself into a sales position there. Made more money than I'd ever made in my life.
Yeah.
Selling lumber. Was good at it, but the anger when you're not doing what you're supposed to do,
Yeah. Yes,
nothing
sir.
goes right. It was everything began to unravel. I became the poster child for road rage. You look up road rage, you'd have my picture there. I was mad at the world.
Yeah.
But as things begin to unravel, and you realize if you don't stop, you're going to lose everything. You're going to lose your children. You're going to lose everything.
Mm.
Uh,
Mm.
we the last thing I'd heard Yahweh say, which was years before now. I mean, this went on for 4 or 5 years. But the last thing I'd heard him say was, "Go submit yourself, Pastor Scott Webb." And so when I began to cry out for help, he's still saying the same thing he said 5 years ago.
Hmm.
Till you do that, there is no further instruction.
Hmm.
And so I went and we loaded up and went to Word of Life. And by now, there is no submitting to Scott Webb. In that period of time, now if you're going to submit to him, you got to submit to the man that submitted to the man that submitted to Pastor Webb, because there was 800 or 900 people there in his congregation by then.
Wow.
So 600-700, I don't remember how many, but it was big,
Man.
big fellowship.
Mm.
But that's what he said do, and that's what I did. And I went and submitted myself, anything they needed done. I do. I didn't know that I could ever preach or pastor again. That's how bad I felt. And I remember sitting there one Sunday night, and he had called out a passage. He was reading something, but I was in Isaiah. I don't have the recall that you and Sean do, but I was in Isaiah. And I remember sitting there that night thinking, I wanted to be back in the ministry so bad. And I remember thinking, if I could just get you to put me on probation, Yahweh, just probation would be good. I'd love to come back. And then I read that passage in Isaiah where he said he will abundantly pardon.
Mm.
And when I read those words, I was wanting probation. He's willing to pardon me abundantly. And I just wept like a child.
Mm. Mm.
So I learned we were there being taught word of faith. That wasn't really charismatic. I don't know how familiar you or your audience is with word of faith, but that's what that was.
Sure.
It was the Rhema Bible training stuff. That's where Pastor Webb had gone to school, was at Rhema under Kenneth Hagin.
I'm very familiar.
Okay. And so, we were there for 5 or 6 years. I then decided, I was working as a salesman for 84. Actually, by that time, I transitioned a little bit into an area manager for them, covering Griffin, Georgia.
Oh, wow.
So, but I felt like that I was just on a train that I couldn't get off of.
Mm-hmm.
And so I began to feel a nudging to go back to school. I looked at Rhema, but it just didn't connect.
Mm-hmm.
But I heard that Jerry Savelle, are you familiar with him?
No, sir.
Kenneth Copeland.
Oh, I'm very familiar with Mr. Copeland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kenneth Copeland and Kenneth are Jerry Savelle, or just like that. Jerry Savelle came out from Kenneth Copeland.
Are you fixing to tell me that you had some fellowship with Kenneth Copeland?
I did.
Oh my goodness, brother. Oh my goodness.
No, it was limited. Most of it was
Okay.
with Jerry Savelle, but I did
Okay.
have some fellowship with Kenneth Copeland. But,
Wow. Wow.
I found out he had a school in Crowley, Texas.
Uh-huh.
I drove out there, looked at school, talked to him, and decided, okay, this is where I'm going to go. I'm going to go to school. And so I came back and began to make plans, and I heard it down on the inside of me again. You need to ask Pastor Webb's permission.
Wow.
And that aggravated me. I thought, no. I'm a grown man. I don't have to ask his permission
Yeah.
to go to school. And this struggle went on the inside of me for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks. And finally, Matthew, this is what I heard. He said to me, the rock said to me,
mm-hmm.
Go read about Matthew at the burning bush. So I did. I went and read it, and it astounded me. This man had a burning bush experience where Yahweh told him to go to Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
He left that burning bush, went to his father-in-law, Jethro,
mm-hmm.
and asked permission to go.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't say, I am going. He asked that man's permission to go because that's who he was submitted to. And the rock said, you haven't had a burning bush experience. You need to go ask his permission. And so I set up a meeting with him. And the reason I didn't want to, I saw several men in the time I was there who felt like they were called to go do something, and they'd go to Pastor Webb, and Pastor Webb would shoot them down, tell them, no, that's not what you're supposed to do. Sit down, shut up, and listen to me preach. And I thought, I'm not doing that. But I did. I set up a meeting with him, went down and sat down with him, and I told him, he asked me why I wanted to go to school there, and I said, I don't think it's so much about going to school. It's about getting me off this train I'm on. I'm on a train, and the only way I know to get off is just jump off. And so I want to jump off, and I want to go to school. And he said, this is of God. You need to go. And even his staff said they'd never heard him say anything like that to somebody. And so we went. The miracles, I could spend the rest of the afternoon telling you about the miracles that took place to get us there, how we were sustained there, enrolled in school there. The fall we went there, Jerry Savelle had never had a church in his whole entire ministry. He's always a traveling evangelist. But on October the 8th of that year, they launched a church. On October the 11th, Jerry Savelle asked me if I'd be his associate pastor. I could tell you miracle after miracle after miracle that took place to make that happen. But, I was his associate pastor, very prestigious position.
Wow.
But in 2000, I went and talked to him and told him that I felt like I was supposed to come to North Alabama and start a church.
And this is before you knew everything that you know now.
Yeah, I was Word of Faith.
You were strict Word of Faith. So,
I began to know the name. I began to study the name out.
Really? While you
Yes.
were in Word of Faith, you started studying about the sacred name.
Well, yes, sir. And, I told you I was bitter and angry and stuff like that. But actually, while I was at that Pentecostal church that I killed as fast as I could, while I was there was an elderly gentleman who lived in the area. His name was Earl Otzberger. He was in his 80s, healthy as a horse. That man was phenomenal. But he would come by and knock on my door and want to talk to me about the Sabbath. And we couldn't have disagreed more about the Sabbath. But I began to study the Sabbath, not because I wondered if what he said was true. I began to study the Sabbath because I felt like I needed to help this old man understand that it had been changed to the first day of the week. But you know how that goes. As soon as I began to study it, I realized that the seventh day has never been changed. The Sabbath has never been changed.
Wow.
But I'd faced so much rejection, I buried it. I began to honor it myself, but I didn't teach it. And then that led me to, I would drive, I graduated quite some time before. There was no internet back then.
Sure.
There was no Google. And so I would drive to the library at Sanford University, and I'd go in there and sit down on the floor, and I'd just pull books off the shelf. And I began to see the pagan origin of Christmas and Easter.
Sure.
And so I eliminated those out of my personal life. But
you're still Word of Faith. You're still Word of Faith.
I was still at that time Pentecostal, and then Word of Faith as we went into Word of Life Christian Center there with Pastor Webb. So,
and this was late 90s or 2000s?
That's
late
exactly.
90s? And that's when I changed.
The 90s. So there was a calling, wasn't there? There was
97, 96, 97,
there you go.
98. Yeah.
But the difference is you're preaching it, and I'm trying to live it, but I'm not preaching it.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I would tell folks is when we got to Texas and I became that associate pastor, sometimes people would ask me if I do weddings. One of the staff members, particularly of Jerry Savelle Ministries, asked me if I'd do her wedding for her. And wanted to know if I had a printed copy, and I'd written my own wedding ceremony, so I gave her a copy of it. She came back a couple of days later and said, "Oh, this is beautiful. I want you to do it, but only one change, and that is you use the name Yahweh. We don't want to use the name Yahweh. Just use Lord or God."
Wow.
And so I rocked back in my chair, and I realized this is a dividing line. And I said to her, that's my wedding ceremony. If you want me to use my wedding ceremony, I'm going to talk about Yahweh.
Right.
If you don't want Yahweh in it, you need to get somebody else who has a different wedding ceremony.
Right.
And she thought about it for a second. She said, "I guess using the name Yahweh will be okay." Because, I love to put, when I do weddings, the Aaronic blessing on people. Yahweh bless you, keep you. Through my journey, I learned about the Sabbath first. Mm-hmm. And then we began to see the paganism of the holidays the churches celebrate, and begin to get those out of my life. But when we left Texas and came to Huntsville, we didn't know a soul in Huntsville, not one soul, but we came to Huntsville to start what we called the Church of Huntsville. Mm-hmm. We started in a little old AV room at the Grissom High School, later moved into a room we rented from a daycare facility called Meemaws. And we met in a little room in there. Eventually we rented a building of our own.
Wow.
But in that building, we grew, 120 people or so. Mm-hmm. But I began to realize I couldn't suppress what I knew. And so I think I always use from day one, I
Mm-hmm.
used the name Yahweh when we got here, and Yeshua. I used those names, and so people would inquire, but that was pretty much all I did. But then I began to teach on the paganism that we weren't going to tolerate and allow into our fellowship, and that was Easter.
Right.
And, Valentine's Day. Somebody won't do a Valentine party. No, we're not doing that here.
Right.
Christmas, we're not doing that here.
Mm-mm.
And so, you lose quite a few people over that.
Yeah.
And then we transferred out of that building we went east and met in a hotel conference hall, conference center. We met there, and that's when I began to teach on the Sabbath.
Wow.
And I finished teaching on the Sabbath one Sunday morning. And so when I finished, have everybody stand up, because as soon as I'm done, I have everybody stand up and I put the Aaronic blessing on them.
Sure.
But I had everybody stand up, and we've got a guy in our assembly. You'd have to know him. His name's Conrad Brown. Conrad is he's just a big old teddy bear, adorable, such a lovely man, but also very blunt. And so we stood up before I could put the Aaronic blessing on everybody. He said, "And why are we meeting on Sunday? When are we going to go to Sabbath?" And I said, "Well, how about next Saturday?" "That sounds good." So
wow,
that's how we began.
Oh my
Meeting on
goodness.
the Sabbath. And we went from 120 teaching those things, down to 40 or 50, and
Yeah.
now around 35 or 40, and we
Yeah.
meet in homes.
Yeah.
There's a community center just at the end of my driveway here. When it's available, we'll meet in it.
Sure.
But the people who have endured, Matthew, I wish you could meet them. These are some of the finest people a man could ever want to pastor.
When did you start the assembly in North Alabama?
As I said, we started as the Church of Huntsville,
Mm-hmm.
and that was 20 years ago.
Okay.
Just it'll be 21 years this March.
Okay.
I would say about 7 or 8 years. No. I've been living here for 11 years. I live out in the woods in Jackson County.
Mm-hmm.
I did live in downtown Huntsville for a while, but we've been here for 11 years. So I'd say about 12 or 14 years ago,
Okay.
I was driving 11 or 12 years ago. I was driving down County Road 8, which comes out here where we live, and the word ayin just dropped in my spirit. Ayin, which is the Hebrew word for eye or to see. And I was rejoicing over what Yahweh was showing us, the things he was revealing to us. We called them pearls of great price. We said we were just stringing up pearls because every time we opened the scriptures, he was showing us something new and different. And so I took that back to our folks and said, we're not the church anymore. No, we're an assembly. And we're the Assembly of Yahweh in North Alabama. You have to kind of force that acronym.
Yeah.
But AYIN, Assembly of Yahweh in North Alabama. So
Wow.
we changed it, I would say 11, 12 years ago.
Man.
And
well, you've been, so that Assembly of Yahweh, that's been for a good little piece now.
It has.
Did you have you studied up under any sacred name or Torah teachers back then to learn some of this, or were you just studying on your own and then you found people, off and on that believed some of the same things that you were walking in? How did that work?
I was studying it on my own, and I rejoice in that I didn't even know there was a sacred name movement or a Torah fellowship or Torah group. I didn't know that.
Wow.
All we tried to do, and that's the reason I call these people very precious. We've been on a journey together, and sometimes it's hard, difficult.
Yeah.
But I
Oh, it
wouldn't go
is.
back for any amount of money. I would not go back to what used to be.
Yeah.
Uh, this journey with these people has been astounding.
Wow.
Those who have hung in there because they have a love for truth.
Mm.
And when you love truth, it'll change your life.
Yes, it will.
And so we just studied the scriptures together.
Mm.
We have looked at it, and then once we discover it, we just do our best
Mm-hmm.
to do what it says.
Mm-hmm.
And that led to, it was only 12 or 13 years ago, we began to attempt to keep the Moedim.
Praise
Didn't know
Yahweh.
anything about them, didn't know a thing about them, but we read them, and eventually Yahweh began to show me how simple they were. But at the time, because I'd never heard of them,
Yeah.
and I didn't have anybody to teach me, they seemed so complicated.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The first time we kept the Feast of Unleavened Bread,
Uh-huh.
you'd have thought somebody was pulling our teeth. Having to go 7 days without leaven just freaked us
Yeah.
out. It
Yeah.
was, we laugh now about how difficult we thought it was. Now we
Yeah.
rejoice at being able to do it.
Hallelujah.
The first time we kept Sukkot,
Uh-huh.
it came an ice storm. It was cold. It was horrible.
Oh, my goodness.
But we now, God, we look forward to
Oh, it's
the
blessing, isn't
Moedim.
it?
They are so
Yeah.
beautiful, so full of meaning.
Yeah.
People who celebrate Easter instead of Passover
Mm.
miss the richness
Yeah.
of these. They reveal our Messiah to us.
Amen.
And
Amen.
so I don't know if I
Wow.
answered your question or not.
No, it's all good. So you've been keeping the feast days for over 10 years, it
Oh,
sounds like.
yes. Yes, we have.
Yeah. What about the people in your congregation wear the tassels? How did you learn about the tassels, or do you?
We don't.
Okay. Okay.
And that falls on me.
Uh-huh.
I have refused, and that may be stubbornness
Uh-huh.
as much as righteousness. It may be stubbornness. I have refused to do anything just because somebody else is doing it.
Sure.
I have to see it, study it, and then do it. And
It's good.
I haven't studied those yet.
Gotcha.
I think that I should, and I see them and I understand them, but we haven't. That's not part of our journey yet.
Yeah, well, I
Just to be
appreciate your
honest with you, that's
honesty.
where we're at.
Yeah, I appreciate your honesty and your humility. So I'm just, people that are watching need to know me and Brother Steve didn't rehearse any of this before, so I'm shooting off the hip with these questions. But I noticed you have a beard. Do you teach that a man should not shave in your congregation, or how do you feel about that?
I do not teach that. In all honesty,
Uh-huh.
I grow a beard to kind of hide some of the scars I've got here and there, but I haven't taught that. That's another part of our journey that I'm not at.
Sure.
I feel like I'm younger in the faith than you are, sir.
Wow.
When I look
Yeah.
back, and I think you've been doing this since '97 or so.
Yeah, I started. I met my wife. My wife's father is Arnold Bowen. I don't know if you've ever heard that name, but he was one of the spearheads in the Sacred Name movement in the
Okay.
90s here in the Southeast, kind of like Jacob O'Meara was. I don't know if you knew Elder Jacob O'Meara
I
with the
didn't.
Assemblies of Yahweh in Bethel, Pennsylvania. They had almost 1,000 people come to Feast
I've
of
heard of
Tabernacles.
that Assembly of Yahweh in
Yeah.
Bethel. Yes.
So yeah, now I was raised Pentecostal, kind of word of faith, charismatic-y, Pentecostal. My uncle was Franklin Walden. He had Franklin Walden Ministries, 10 evangelists. You may know the name David Terrell.
I do not.
Okay, well, David Terrell's big 10 evangelist here in the
Okay.
South. So you think, when you mention Kenneth Copeland, like it's that kind of style,
Okay.
and big altar calls and a lot of what I would probably now say some of it was chaos going on in the church.
Yes.
Not that
Yes.
I'm for anything the scriptures speak of. So in our congregation now, I lead the song service with a guitar, and then my brother-in-law plays the drums for us. My sister-in-law, she passed away, may she rest in peace, but she played the keyboard for us for a
Right.
while. And so we lift our hands and we may shout, especially on Yom Teruah,
Oh,
we
yes, you gotta
shout.
shout Yom Teruah.
And so and the scripture speaks of a joyful noise and playing skillfully, and so
Yes.
we're all about all of that. And I definitely believe in the gifts of the Spirit. I think some people have abused them, but I don't allow the abuse to turn me away from their proper use.
They have been abused, but we talked about this just a few months ago in our assembly, that if we are Torah observant and say we want to follow Yeshua,
Mm-hmm.
we want to walk as he walked in Torah,
Mm-hmm.
then we've got to understand the signs that followed him,
Yeah.
the healings and the miracles that took place. And when we fully understand what it means to walk in Torah, I think we'll begin to see a revival of those kind of things in our midst.
Amen.
So yes, sir, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, yeah. Have you ever, like in the last 10 years or 15 years or so, since you've been preaching this the name Yahweh and the Hebrew name Yeshua, the Sabbath, the feast days, I'm guessing you observe the dietary laws.
Yes, sir.
Oh, praise Yah.
That
Oh,
was
good.
that was also one of the first things we did. This was, back in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
When I said I was going down in late 80s, early 90s, going down and sitting in the floor. That's one of the things I was studying for myself personally.
Wow.
And we latched on, my family and I latched on to these dietary laws, and we began to cut those
Wow.
things that are not food out of our life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, still going back and being a part of Word of Faith churches,
Yeah.
people invite you out to eat. They think you're weird because you won't eat shrimp and bacon, but
Yeah.
that's okay. We never really spent any time explaining it. We just didn't do it. So.
Have you ever had anybody get in touch with you, like myself, anybody that believes similar to you, like I've done and Brother Sean has done in this past month, to try to, fellowship or get a contact? Or have you learned from any other Torah teachers in the last 10 years as well?
I meant what I said to you guys, last week, I guess, when I talked to Sean.
Uh-huh.
And I think our folks have felt like we're on the island by ourselves.
Wow.
I've studied this stuff out and haven't really been a part of a group.
Okay.
So the fact that you and Sean reached out, I cannot tell you the rejoicing that has taken place in my heart as I've been able to go and watch y'all's teachings, y'all's videos, y'all's interviews and debates and things. I feel a connection with you.
Yeah.
And I mean that sincerely.
Thank you, brother.
That it's something that I have needed.
Wow.
As I said before, you call me an elder,
Yeah.
yet I feel like I'm younger in the faith than you are. And I don't know how old you are. I think I've heard you say you've got 5 children.
I have 5 children and 5 grandchildren.
Wow.
Now, yeah,
I'd have never guessed you had grandchildren.
Yeah, I started off young. So I was married when I was 16, Brother Steve. I'm 42 now.
Okay.
But we believed in the 2 commands there in Genesis to be fruitful and multiply, given to Adam and Noah.
Yes,
so
my oldest son is 43.
Oh, wow. I'm guessing you're in your 60s.
I turned 65 in April.
Yep. Yes. My dad's just a hair older than my dad. So yeah, Yahweh called me out. I mean, I've only known the church life. I mean, I've always known the church life. I mean, from my beginning, and I'm so thankful. I have great parents. They raised me in a very strict Christian conservative home, and I'm so thankful for that. There's some things that I was raised to believe in that I no longer hold to, but most of what I was taught by my parents, I still hold to. It's a great Christian foundation.
Yes.
And of course, Christian, I learned means a follower of the Christ, or like I like to say, a follower of the Messiah.
Of the Messiah. Yes.
And we used to sing a song in church, Pentecostal church. It said, "To be like Jesus, to be like Jesus. That's all I ask is to be like him."
Right.
And so we sang that song, and we'd tear up. And then when I reached 15 or 16 years old, when I first started studying the Bible and started trying to actually live like Jesus lived,
Right.
that's when I got in trouble.
Yes.
So,
It's okay to say it. It's a whole different thing to do it.
yep. And when I told people, what would Jesus do? He would use his original name, Yeshua. That's what name his mama called him.
Yes.
People didn't like that. Same thing with the Almighty and his name. But yeah, I'm thankful for my Christian conservative upbringing. But it does sadden me that some people in the church I grew up in, and some people in my family, they're still at the same place that they were 30 years ago. And we just keep studying and advancing by Yahweh's grace and mercy in the scriptures and in the Torah. And I'm real big in teaching the Torah. I've
Yes.
dedicated the last half of my life now is strictly going to be like Ezra 7, where he purposed in his heart to study the Torah, to practice it, and teach its principles in Israel.
Wow.
And that's what I'm doing hopefully for my last 40 years.
Right.
But Yahweh is good, brother, and I feel blessed to know you. And I guess I refer to you as an elder because in Hebrew scripture, elder means the gray head and the gray beard. Leviticus 19:32 says we're supposed to even stand up when a gray head man comes into a room. So and I know we hadn't talked about this before now, but I've got in my heart and my mind that I would love for you to come and preach for us at our assembly. I need to talk with the other two elders in the assembly about it. I don't think they're going to have a problem with it after they watch this interview. But we have an assembly here. Yahweh's blessed us with a good building and facility. We have about 5 acres, all paid for our feast grounds, and we probably average, I'd say, 50 to 60 people every Sabbath. And around 100 for the feast days. Of course, we've got the spring feast coming up. I'm so excited for that. But yeah, we'll have to coordinate it where maybe you can come and teach for us, and I think it will be a blessing.
Well, I feel the same way
for our
about you.
people.
And I want to see this relationship developed.
Yes, sir.
I need it and cherish it and would love for that to happen.
Yeah. Well, I have a feeling we're gonna. I can't wait to hug you neck.
Yeah,
And I have a feeling we're gonna have some good fellowship, brother. Before we close out today, and I have thoroughly enjoyed just listening to your journey and your stories, and I think that the people that watch the channel are going to love it. I enjoy getting into deep theology and Torah talks, but I like sometimes just to get down to earth and talk about where we came from and how Yahweh has blessed us in our journey. I feel that's what we've done today. But if you had something to leave, I want you to leave as we close here, the people that are watching, based upon the journey that you've had, where you came from, where you're at now, something to encourage and challenge the listeners. Who knows who may see this? What would you leave them with, brother? What would you say?
Wow. When I look back on my journey, as difficult as it was sometimes, as the pain of lifelong family or friends and family, beginning to ostracize you, simply because you believe the Bible. As difficult as that was, as I said earlier, I'd never go back. Sometimes you'll see people. I think this is a grave mistake, Matthew. Sometimes you will see people who begin to see some of these things, whether it's the Sabbath or whether it's, hey, the law hasn't passed away or whatever it is, or the paganism of the holidays. They'll begin to see it, but then they will they love the fellowship where they're at so much, they will excuse it by saying, I'm going to try to stay in here and reach others.
Mm.
Um, I don't think that ever works. We're called to come out from among them. And as difficult as that is, that's the only way you can walk in deeper truth. You got to come out from among them. If you stay there, um, you're not going to have an impact. And I don't think you're going to be shown any greater truth. The way that it's been in my personal life is Yahweh would show me one thing. And when I'd walk toward it and say, wow, this is amazing, then he'd show me another. And
Mm.
then he would show me another. The spiritual principle is, to him that has, more will be given.
Amen.
To him that has not, even that which he thinks that he has is going to get taken away. And so Yahweh's like any good father. He'll
Yes.
show you something, and if you walk toward it, he'll show you something else.
Yes.
And if you
Amen.
walk toward it, he'll show you something else. And that's the reason I call it a journey. It's just been one step after another going toward what Yahweh continues to show me. So love the truth more than you do the fellowship and the acceptance of whatever group that you're a part of. Even though it may seem difficult at the time, when you walk on this journey with Yahweh, my word, the peace and the joy that comes from it, and the intimacy of the relationship you begin to create with your creator, to have with your creator,
Yes.
there's no substitute for it.
Oh man. Beautiful, brother. I love you. Tell your wife I appreciate her for letting us do this, and your
Yes, sir.
family. Is it how many of your family is in your assembly? Do you have
I,
children
I,
and stuff?
I have 4 children.
Okay.
I have 7 grandchildren. 3 of my children and 6 of my grandchildren live here on this farm with me. My son's got 7 acres that joins us. One of my daughter and son-in-law have a couple of acres that join us, and then
Wow.
my
Wow.
daughter and son-in-law, my oldest daughter and son-in-law, and her 2 children, they have 13 acres that join back behind us. And so, what a blessing! Boy, they've
Mm.
never missed a step on this
Oh
journey
man.
with us at all. I've
Hallelujah.
got a younger son. Um, he he lives about 30 miles away. He lives in Huntsville.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, a dynamic young man. He doesn't attend the assembly right
Mm-hmm.
now, but he is a dynamic young man, and I expect him to. So,
Yeah. Isn't it a
but
blessing to fellowship and worship with your family? All of my children attend the congregation, and all of my grandchildren. And now I see my children teaching their children.
that's exactly right. My
And
children teaching their children, and their
oh,
children never having to go through the things my children had to go through,
yeah.
as far as having to unlearn so many things. But my children never missed a beat. My 2
Mhm.
oldest children, when we got to Texas, they enrolled in the Bible school with me out there. They went to Bible school. Sometimes they've had to uproot themselves and their friends, but they love truth.
Yeah.
And they haven't done it just because Dad did it. They've studied it out for themselves, and
Yeah.
they are a vital part of our assembly here. And I am thankful
Yeah.
to have my family surrounding me. It
Oh,
is a
man.
blessing of Yahweh. It is.
It sure is.
Yes,
It
sir.
sure is. Brother, I've enjoyed it. I've
I've
enjoyed
enjoyed
it.
it too. I hope I didn't talk too much, Matthew.
That's why I had you on. I wanted you to do most of the talking. So.
I
But
kind of
listen,
froze up last week, but
well, that's okay. But everybody that's viewing, um, to get in contact with the fellowship that Brother Steve pastors, and it's the Assembly of Yahweh in North Alabama on
that's correct.
Facebook.
Assembly of Yahweh, North Alabama, and I know the YouTube channel. I think it doesn't have the. I think it just simply Assembly of Yahweh, North Alabama.
Yes, everybody go subscribe to that. I subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I've watched. Man, I started, I think, your series in Genesis.
Okay.
And I love, brother, this is how I teach. I love how you go verse by verse or chapter by chapter,
Yes, sir.
and you're methodical. It's very systematic. I like slow. That's how I teach. I want the people to understand. One of my favorite books that I read at least one time a year is by an old Anglican minister named J.C. Ryle, and it's called Simplicity in Preaching. And one of the things he points out is how that we need to make, as preachers, we need to make sometimes complicated things easy to understand, because we don't want to speak over the heads of everybody. And so
Yes.
I can see that you are seasoned in that. You're very detailed in wanting everybody to comprehend and understand to the best of their ability that they can. I have thoroughly enjoyed your sermons. It is so good to see another pastor teach from the Bible, because we're few and far between in these days, not teaching what they want to, not most preachers. The way I was taught growing up is that, you kind of have an idea throughout the week, and then you kind of fling together a few verses to go with your idea, uh, versus what I do now. When somebody asks me, well, what did you preach about last week? I always answer not with a title, but with a text. I
Yes.
tell them,
Yes,
well, I
sir.
preached on Exodus 21, 12 through 14 last week. And then they say, oh, well, what's that about? And then I can share it with them. But I teach the younger men that are learning that you start with your text. You preach the text. You may add in something that happened to you in life or during the week or something like that, but you want to preach and exegete the actual scripture, not your life story or something.
I can't do topical stuff.
Yeah.
As you say, it's exegesis, going
Yes.
chapter by chapter, verse by verse, and sometimes word by word.
Yes.
Very early on, we did a study through the book of Job. This was back when we were down in South Huntsville, still in that building, but it took us, I think it was 23 months.
Wow.
But we went word by word through the book of Job, because it's so misunderstood sometimes. But
Yeah.
those are the kind of things that enrich your life. I was teaching through Genesis and just felt a prompting to come out of it for a while and start in the book of Enoch,
Yeah.
because there were so many things that Enoch, said that would enhance our understanding of the book of Genesis. So
Sure.
we're right now, yesterday we looked at Enoch 8, 9, and 10, kind of actually rehearsing some things we'd already looked at in Enoch 8, 9, and 10.
Yeah.
But then we'll move on. And so I don't know how long it's going to take to get through the book of Enoch, because it's a completely different way of studying for me, because, in the canonized stuff, you can look it up and look up the Hebrew words and look up the Greek words, and you can do that. You can't do that with the book of Enoch. So it's been a different kind of a study, but that's where we're at right now.
Praise Yah.
Matthew, I'm well aware of the fact you didn't have to reach out to this old country boy in Alabama, but you did. And I will forever be thankful to you. Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Brother Steve.
Look forward to getting to know you. Have a blessed day.
You got it, brother. Shalom.
Shalom.